Gang, we're talking buyer's negotiation strategy with timing, utilizing the contract effectively. How is your agent communicating with you? Probably the most critical thing you need to ask yourself. And then home sellers, how do you price your home right now to make sure you get top dollar? All right, gang. Hey, Jesse Abania's Greenhouse Group, flanked by my man Greg Kuchan, Greenhouse Group. You don't have to flame. We'll get him in the frame for episode number 2 of hashtag Home Sellers FAQ and hashtag Home Buyers FAQ. By the way, I didn't mention this in the first episode. I don't know these questions, so Greg has literally got me in the hot seat. Greg, what's the first question we got this week?
All right, so Freddie Ramirez asks, how long does the seller have to respond to my offer?
Ooh, that's a good one, especially right now, Freddie. And right now, I should share, in San Diego right now, I don't know if this is true where I'm catching you right now, but we are in definitely a seller's market, okay? Inventory is horribly starved. And the great news about this is that we're still actually in a buyer's market as well because the rates are so amazing. You got people lined up outside the door, putting multiple offers down immediately. So a buyer is always encouraged, or you should say with the correct tutelage of an agent who knows what they're doing, to be able to get there first on the scene. We talk about this all the time, especially with our first-time buyers. It's one of our success hacks is to get there first. And it kind of flies in the face of another conventional wisdom in any traditional negotiation, which is you don't want to show your card too soon, right? So you're kind of in this weird little juxtapose where it's like you want to get out there first and put your best foot forward and show the seller that you're serious and you're going to be an awesome buyer who's going to be there till the end so they say yes to your offer. But at the same point in time, you don't want to be the first guy to put a number out there and then have that agent unscrupulously use that as a lever or a fulcrum to negotiate all the other offers subsequent against yours, right? So one of the little games that a buyer will play is they'll say, hey, here's my offer early, but you got to get back to me right away. So this offer's only good for a day or two or whatever, right? So here's the problem, Freddie, is that there's not really like a negative per se that's going to come from this too much, but what do you do if they don't, right? The seller's holding all the cards right now. So if you say a day and then they don't get back to you in a day, then what? You know, then you've kind of lost your clout in the conversation because, of course, you're still going to stick around, or usually the case may be you're going to stick around because you want the house. So then your agent has to go back and pander back to listing agent and be like, hey, I know our offer expired, but hey, we still want it. And then they got to do an extension of their time. And so listen, I'm not going to counsel you not to do that. But the reality is that is worked into the process to be able to hopefully protect you, and you can use it to your advantage as a fulcrum. Traditionally, I think by the default of the contract, I think it's 3 days. Yeah. So if you don't play around with that, I think traditionally it's 3 days. And then, of course, sit down and come up with a good strategy based on how you want to be perceived to the seller in that negotiation accordingly. Good question.
All right. Our second question comes from Sharon Klein. She wants to know, how will you keep me informed about the progress of my transaction?
Sharon, so first of all, let me back up by saying that if you look up any poll since the beginning of the internets, for that matter, you will see that the biggest gripe from buyers and sellers in a transaction is a lack of communication. And so, and we actually talked about this last week in the first episode of the Frequently Asked Questions, which is choosing your team and making sure that communication is the most fundamental core aspect of who you decide to put on your team. This plays parcel to that almost perfectly because once you get into the throes of a transaction, okay, and you start getting I think it's like 16 different industries. I think there's like 43 different people that get involved, and there's 7 stages of your typical buyer or seller or loan process. There's so much integrated complexity that even the best communicator is going to get tested. So what does this mean? You got to have systems, okay? So a great question to ask during the interview process of your realtor or lender respectively is this precisely. So when the you-know-what starts getting crazy and it starts hitting the fan, How are you going to update me? What process do you have? And if they say it's just me calling you or emailing you, hey, that's great, and they might be really good at that. But there's also maybe a canary in that coal mine, because if they don't have a system of communication built into their process, like as part of the DNA and the culture of how they communicate, and dare I might even say how they over-communicate, that's a red flag for me. So not to selflessly or shamelessly plug us, but this is one of the things that we are the strongest at, and it's because we took heed to that poll question seriously. And when we built this greenhouse group during unit process, we built it on the shoulders of over-communicating. And I'd say one of the gripes that we sometimes get from our clients, and this is fair enough, is that they get over-inundated sometimes. And if that's totally cool, we'd rather have that with full transparency and disclosure than the opposite, which is where you feel like you're kind of left in the dark and you're wondering what's going on with your transaction, right? So again, it's about systems and it's about the use of technology to find that fine little balance and harmony of making sure that you feel nourished without maybe getting under-communicated or over-communicated based on the amount of frequency that you want, which works for you. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, that's good.
So like the fine-tuning and the element and the dialing in it. Fantastic question, Sharon. What do we got next?
Third question comes from Stephen Matthews. Okay, his question is, what price do you think my house will sell in the current market today, and why? I met Stephen at an open house. Let's just say he had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And just to throw some stats on there, because it was a very open-ended question.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That didn't help too much, I don't think, with that. Because the truth is, man, this market is so heavily segmented, right? For example, we in San Diego County right now, the amount of time that a home is typically staying on the market is exponentially lower in the what we call the alpha markets, like by the water, by the beach, or downtown San Diego, or in the heart of San Diego in most of our communities, than some of the stuff that's displaced out towards East County, right? So what is price? Let's start with price. Price is only a representation of interest as it's perhaps XY axis to time, right? So as for a seller's perspective, your price better reflect how much time you have, right? So if you want to make sure that this property is spoken for in the first 30 days, you got to make sure that your price is adjusting accordingly for that. And then maybe conversely, if you don't really care if it gets into contract right away, or you don't really believe that this is the right market for you, or whatever, the myriad of 100 other different variables that fall into place, then I'm sure your price is going to adjust that accordingly. You might call that testing the market, right? So what I would only encourage you to say, Stefan, is that if you're actually willing to get all, dog and ponied up in the first place and get your home all set up for the photos and then the showings in the open house and then the seller disclosures and the vat of commitment that goes into selling your house, I would highly encourage you to make sure that you have a pricing strategy that best reflects your ability, okay, and hopefully proclivity to get top dollar. Because what experience has taught us over doing this for the last decade and a half is that there's a million ways to approach that. I'm not going to say skin the cat because I hate that analogy. But there seems to be only one finely tuned little alchemy with respect to price that always gets the biggest bang for your buck. And I'm not going to give it away right here, so maybe we'll have that be a lead-in for Stefan if he's interested to reach out. Did he say where he was from?
La Mesa.
Oh, so it's a local cat. Well, Stefan, then this message is actually for you. So again, just to answer this for everybody who's listening, not just Stefan here in La Mesa, is that the specificity and the psychology that you might say, which is directly proportional to how much interest you're going to get, which is then directly proportional to how much money you're going to get, right, is all stemmed back to price being the cure-all. So don't overlook that. So many people we sit down with, they talk about wanting to get the most money for their property, which they should, of course, and then they immediately follow back up with a pricing strategy which probably isn't in attunement or alignment with that being the case. And so the separation becomes at that moment in time, that deciding element, that fork in the road proverbially, is are you coachable? because this only works if we're coaching a winning team. So you can go down the road called everywhere else, or you can go down that road with the specificity of making sure that you're playing that price game effectively to get the most amount of interest in the shortest amount of time, which attracts the greatest avatar of buyer and then always the highest price respectively. That's what any seller wants, hopefully, if they're serious about moving their property. All right, gang, so that's episode 2. I want to thank, help me out, who were the names? Stefan, Sharon, and Freddie for submitting your questions this week. If you've got a question for us, please use hashtag HomeSellersFAQ or hashtag HomeBuyersFAQ, either on the Twitters or the Instagrams or over on the Facebooks. And we'll make sure that we answer them for next week's show. So thanks for playing along.